The Japanese invasion of Taiwan was a conflict between the Empire of Japan and the armed forces of the short-lived Republic of Formosa following the Qing dynasty's cession of Taiwan to Japan in April 1895. At the end of the First Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese sought to take control of their new possession, while the Republican forces fought to resist Japanese occupation. The Japanese landed near Keelung on the northern coast of Taiwan on 29 May 1895, and in a 5-month campaign swept southwards to Tainan. Although their advance was slowed by guerrilla activity, the Japanese defeated the Formosan forces whenever they attempted to make a stand. The Japanese victory at Baguishan on 27 August, the largest battle ever fought on Taiwanese soil, doomed the Formosan resistance to an early defeat. The fall of Tainan on 21 October ended organized resistance to Japanese occupation, and inaugurated 5 decades of Japanese rule in Taiwan. The invasion. Japanese occupation of the Pescadores in 1894. China and Japan went to war. In a few short months the Japanese defeated China's Beiyang fleet, routed the Chinese armies in Manchuria, and captured Port Arthur and Baiwei. Although nearly all the fighting took place in northern China, Japan had important territorial ambitions in southern China. As the war approached its end, the Japanese took steps to ensure that Taiwan would be ceded to Japan under the eventual peace treaty and that they were well placed militarily to occupy the island. In March 1895, peace negotiations between Japan and China opened in the Japanese city of Shimonoseki. Although hostilities in northern China were suspended during these negotiations, Taiwan and the Pescadores were specifically excluded from the scope of the armistice. Possession of the Pescadores, lying midway between mainland China and Taiwan, was the key to a successful occupation of Taiwan. A rumor was widely circulated at this time that the Chinese authorities, realizing that they were powerless to prevent Taiwan and the Pescadores falling into the hands of Japan, had offered to cede them temporarily to Britain, presumably on the understanding that they would be returned at a later date. According to this rumor, the Chinese proposal was discussed by the British cabinet, and the British Prime Minister Lord Rosebery and the Foreign Secretary Lord Kimberley refused even to consider it. Apparently, the British cabinet's reluctance to accept this poisoned chalice was based not, as has sometimes been suggested, on the fear that accepting Taiwan would immediately embroil Britain with Japan, but rather on the calculation that if Taiwan became a British colony, even temporarily, a wholesale partition of China would have followed. Although the Pescadores were garrisoned by 15 Chinese regular battalions and defended by the recently completed HS Itai Coastal Defense Battery, the Japanese met very little resistance during the landing operation as the defenders were demoralized. It took the Japanese only 3 days to secure the islands. After a naval bombardment of the Chinese forts, Japanese troops went ashore on Fisher Island and Penghu Island on 24 March. Fought several brief actions with defending Chinese troops, captured the key HS Itai battery and occupied Makung. In the next 2 days they occupied the other main islands of the Pescadores group. Japanese combat casualties were negligible, but a cholera outbreak shortly after the fall of the islands killed more than 1,500 men of the Japanese occupation force. The soldiers of the defeated Chinese garrison of the Pescadores, most of whom surrendered without a fight, were repatriated by the Japanese to mainland China. Cession of Taiwan to Japan and proclamation of Republic of Formosa. The Japanese occupation of the Pescadores was of considerable strategic significance, preventing China from substantially reinforcing its garrisons in Taiwan, having made it almost impossible for China to fight successfully for Taiwan. The Japanese pressed their claims to the island in the peace negotiations. The Treaty of Shimonoseki was signed on 17 April 1895, and contained a clause requiring the cession of Taiwan and the Pescadores. On 10 May, Admiral Kabiyama Sukenori was appointed the first Japanese Governor-General of Taiwan. When the news of the treaty's contents reached Taiwan, a number of notables from central Taiwan led by Chu Fengchia decided to resist the transfer of Taiwan to Japanese rule. On 23 May, these men proclaimed the establishment of a free and democratic Republic of Formosa in Taipei. Chang Chi Tung, the King Governor-General of Taiwan, was prevailed upon to become the Republic's first president, and his old friend Liu Yongfu, the retired Black Flag Army commander who had become a national hero in China for his victories against the French in northern Vietnam a decade earlier, was invited to serve as Grand General of the Army. Chu Fengchia was appointed Grand Commander of Militia, with the power to raise local militia units throughout the island to resist the Japanese. On the Chinese mainland, Chang Chi Tung, the powerful Governor-General of Liangqiang, tacitly supported the Formosan resistance movement, and the Republicans also appointed Chang Chi Tung, a disgraced Chinese diplomat who understood European ways of thinking. As the Republic's foreign minister, his job would be to sell the Republic abroad. There was little or no popular support in Taiwan for the proclamation of the Republic, and many Western observers considered its establishment as a cynical ploy by its authors to evade China's obligations under the Treaty of Shimonoseki. Acting under the authority of the new republic, Chinese troops would be able to resist the Japanese in Taiwan without technically breaching the terms of the treaty, and if they were successful, Taiwan could return to Chinese rule at some future date. There was therefore little sympathy in Europe for the Republic, despite its impeccably Parisian manifesto. Nor was there any support for the Formosan resistance movement in Peking, as considerable diplomatic efforts were then underway to persuade Japan to relinquish the Liaotung Peninsula. Under the terms of the Treaty of Shimonoseki, China had agreed to cede the peninsula to Japan. But once the treaty's contents became known, there was alarm in Europe at Japan's rapacity. In a diplomatic demarque known as the Triple Intervention, Russia, France and Germany put pressure on Japan in late April 1895 to restore the peninsula to China. On 5 May the Japanese agreed to retrocede the Liaotung Peninsula to China in return for an increased indemnity. But it took until December 1895 to negotiate the necessary treaty amendments. And while the negotiations were in progress, Japanese troops remained in place. During this period, the Empress Dowager and her officials had excellent reasons not to offend Japan, and the King Court was horrified when it heard the news in mid-May that several officials in Taiwan intended to resist the Japanese occupation and that there was talk of setting up a republic that recognized King suzerainty. Shortly before the proclamation of the Republic of Formosa, the King Court ordered Li Qingfang, the nephew and adopted son of China's elder statesman Li Hengchang, to proceed to Taiwan and formally transfer sovereignty over the island from China to Japan. It also cabled an imperial edict to Taipei on 20 May. Directing Chang Chi Tung to order all King's civil officials and all officers and soldiers to leave Taiwan. Tang himself was ordered to return to Peking. Spurned by European public opinion and disavowed by China, the Republic of Formosa enjoyed only 1 week of uninterrupted existence. During this time it decked itself out with the conventional trappings of sovereignty. The Republicans adopted a national flag with a yellow tiger on a blue background, ordered a large silver state seal to be made, and began to issue paper money and postage stamps in the name of the Republic. The foreign minister Chang Chi Tung, who had lived in France for many years, was responsible for crafting much of this Republican symbolism.